Hey everyone, for the main feed this week, we are unlocking last week's Patreon episode with Brian Krassenstein, so you can hear that here. For the Patreon episode, we have a conversation that we had hours after DeSantis launched his campaign on Twitter with Mr. Too Damn Chris. It's a good episode, so you should check it out. Patreon.com/Western Kabuki. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
And here we are, behind the paywall on the Western Kabuki Patreon. I am, of course, joined by my fellow Western Kabuki family members. Alex, how are you?
Great. Let's do it.
Wonderful. Yes. Caleb, the bird respecter, how are you feeling this evening?
Fantastic. Weather's great. Can't complain about anything.
It's been nice. And June?
I'm doing wonderful. Great night so far.
And we consider ourselves very privileged to be joined by none other than one of the Krassenstein brothers, Brian. Brian Krassenstein, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I feel privileged to be here.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. So I guess what I wanted to I know you talked to Caleb about a lot of setting this up, but I was really curious about what is it that because I asked you before we started recording, I asked you how you wanted to be introduced, and you said one of the Krassenstein brothers, but how do you define your role? You guys have a lot of followers. You guys do a lot of your role in a lot of different circles. So how do you define your role online and in the general Twitter space?
That's a good question. I don't really define it anyhow, other than just me posting my opinion. And I consider myself left of center, but I like hearing both sides, and I like having that dialogue and talking to people that have different views. So I think that's important.
So who do you consider somebody who's not exactly on your same side that you would still like to hear from?
Yeah, I mean, anybody on the right, I like conversing and creating dialogue. I take part in a lot of Twitter spaces, and most of them are more right-leaning spaces. And yeah, I get ganged up on all the time, but it's interesting. It's interesting to just be able to hear what they have to say, even if they do attack me a little bit. I kind of developed thick skin being on Twitter.
Brian, I was just telling my co-hosts, we've got some questions and stuff, but nothing that we're going to say here is going to be even close to the things that you endure on your. I was listening to yours yesterday, by the way. The things that people say and the replies to your tweets and stuff. Even for instance, one thing I do want to ask you about right off the bat was there was that video that you were talking about of where you guys were joking about how you were Soros funded, and it got on InfoWars where they cut out the end where you're like, haha, we're obviously just joking. And people were calling you all kinds of terrible things. And you're like, well, here's the full video. And the people were still like, oh, convenient of you to have this context now 3 years later or whatever, So well, tell us about that. And then how do you, I guess maybe, how do you deal with people who in the face of whatever evidence you could reasonably provide still choose to not believe you and probably hate your guts?
Yeah, so that video actually stems back to, I think it was 2018 or 19. And at the time we wrote a book. It was How the People Trumped Ronald Plump. It was a parody book about Donald Trump. We had a squirrel living in his hair called Weave Bannon. And it was
okay. If you brought it up, I'm going to ask. You said Weave Bannon because that is the weakest pun in the book, right? Robert Morrill, Ronald Plump. Those are much better puns than Weave Bannon. Can we get a confirmation on that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you know all the characters. I'm impressed.
We're acutely aware of that book.
Yeah, so we wanted to do a funny parody video for the launch of the book about how people make up things about us, we were paid by the DNC or whatnot. So we
Right.
we decided I was going to go upstairs. I had Ed come over. I pretended to have a drink in my hand. It was actually dyed water. I wasn't actually drinking whiskey, but
Well, then you're a better man than I, Brian.
yeah, it was like 10 a.m. So I mean, if it was filmed a little bit later, I probably would have had whiskey. But I was
Hell yeah.
upstairs,
Hell yes.
and Ed is actually the one interviewing me, and he's like muffling his voice. He's like, "Hey man, I think you're Brian, aren't you?" So like I see, I just did it there. So I just proved that it was Ed because we had the same voice. But Ed was interviewing me like undercover with this hidden video camera. It looked like kind of like
Project Veritas.
Yeah,
Project Veritas
exactly
style.
what I was thinking.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And I said, oh yeah, we're actually paid by the higher ups to sow division, and then the video cuts, and that's the part that Infowars actually showed, where at the end of the video I say, no, I'm just joking. Of course we don't. We just tweet because we were pissed off at Trump or whatever I said, and only that first half actually was posted. I think Gateway Pundit posted it, Infowars posted it, True Pundit posted it. So it spread back in 2019 like that. So like I don't really blame people for falling for it, even though like it seems like a clear like joke because of the muffled voice and the fact that I was saying some pretty crazy stuff, right?
You're being too nice about this. It was very obviously a parody, and anybody who fell for that is an imbecile, in my opinion.
So yeah, so then what happened was it was not yesterday, the day before. Elon Musk made his Magneto and George Soros tweet, and I decided to reply in it, and I kind of just corrected him, or I gave my opinion, and that tweet went viral, and Elon replied back to me, and he said that George Soros hates humanity, blah blah blah, and it was
Everyone. I feel like so many people have seen that now. Yeah, that reply to you.
So that basically happened like within the past 24 hours, and so I guess I'm really curious. Like, obviously, on the side of like your brand and what you and your family, I mean, because it's not just your brother, right? I mean, it's like your whole family is kind of involved in this thing you guys do together, and I kind of wonder what you think about Elon inserting himself into that. Like, how do you feel about, like, obviously it's great that like a really famous guy and the guy who owns Twitter wants to talk to you, but like, how do you feel about Elon as like a guy who's interested in you? How do you feel about him as like just a guy in general?
Yeah, like so first of all, I have to say that like before any of this Twitter stuff, I was a pretty big supporter of like Elon's accomplishments. I love Tesla. I love SpaceX. I absolutely disagree with so many of the conspiratorial stuff he posts on Twitter. So that when I got involved with that George Soros tweet, that's what sparked that video to be shared again, right? So like I think it got like a 1.5 million views. But something that I do appreciate that Elon kind of boosted on Twitter was the fact that there's community notes. So I was actually able to go in and add a community note and say, hey, this is the real video, the whole video. It was a parody. And that's actually up there now. So I got to compliment Elon on that, even though I disagree with many of his takes. I know many people on the left are kind of like anti anything Elon now. And most of it stems from him unbanning all of those accounts that he unbanned, which actually included me and Ed and I.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. I was like, "Oh my God, the Krassensteins!
They're back.
They're back!
They're back.
They're back!"
But I think that there's
2016s are back.
And also, Brian, really quick, you are in the lion's den because the central theme of our podcast basically is how much we all fucking hate Elon. So
I knew that.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but it's also important to note that like what Brian is saying is like 100% valid. Is that like there were people who got unfairly banned from Twitter that deserve to be back, and I think you guys were among them, and like especially considering like they also gave the account back to the guy who runs the Stormfront website.
Yeah.
It's like, who deserves to be banned more?
Like Andrew Anglin or something.
Yeah.
So who deserves to be banned more? These twin brothers who wrote a children's book, or the Nazi who's trying to bring upon the white nation to America?
Really quick on that, can you tell us a little bit, Brian, about ostensibly why? I know you've denied for your part the reasons why you guys were suspended, but you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was May 23rd, 2019. I remember this because it was
Hell
my
yes,
wife's
a
birthday.
date.
Let's go.
Honestly, I respect that. If I were suspended on Twitter, I would have that burned into my brain as well. I respect it.
And into your forehead via a hot iron.
I was on an airplane getting ready to fly to Wisconsin. It was my wife's birthday. We were going back to see her family. I'm like, oh man.
Big shout out Wisconsin on this podcast. Big shout out Wisconsin.
And I'm like, I can't make this a big deal. It's her birthday. I'm just gonna try my best not to like be super pissed off this whole week. So I tried my best. It probably didn't work too well. But so we were banned in 2019, and at the time, Twitter put out a statement that like they didn't say what we did. They said people are banned for buying engagement, using multiple accounts, etc. That was in their press statement. So everybody immediately jumped on, like Fox News, everybody, all those right-wing sites, news media companies jumped on the fact that they put out the statement and they didn't say what we did. They implied what we did. So there's news stories saying that we were running bot farms. We bought our.
So you never
account.
knew. You never got like confirmation for why you got banned?
At first, no. So then we actually hired an attorney and we threatened to sue Twitter for defamation. Just not for banning us, but for defamation because they implied that we did all these things that we didn't. What we found out after our attorneys spoke to their legal team, and this took like probably a year to actually find out, was that Twitter believed that we had purchased our accounts. So the account I'm using now and the account Ed is using now, they thought we purchased them. And I don't exactly blame Twitter for this because of the history of the accounts. And I'm probably going to be made fun of.
Okay. So I don't, Brian, we're your friends here, and you don't have to introduce this yourself. And I genuinely, like, we've talked about like our own cultural consumptions and our own ideas of like what makes like a good movie, what makes a good comic book, what makes a good musical artist. And I think that there's so much wiggle room. And if you listen to this is a Patreon episode as well. So if you listen to the previous Patreon episode where I just like I talked a lot about like popular culture, and I think it serves a lot of really positive outcomes. So I think if there's a grown man who's really into Justin Bieber, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I'll give the backstory on that.
Yeah, please do.
So it was like 2000 and I think maybe 11, maybe even before that. And we owned the domain name ay.com. I wish I kept it because I could probably sell it for like $2 million now. But it was ay.com, and we made it was going to be a site called Anonymous U, where we catered to like different fan clubs and people could post anonymously towards those fan clubs. And so what we did at the time, this was like 13 years ago, we created fan club Twitter accounts. So we had Justin Bieber fan club, we had like Jonas Brother fan club.
Okay.
So we had a bunch of these. And with with Jonas Brothers and Justin Bieber fan club accounts, for some reason people must have thought they were actually Justin Bieber and Jonas Brothers. So like just sitting there, they gained like 200,000 followers each. So we go back years later, we're like, hey, we have these accounts that have tons of followers. And this was right when Trump was running for election. We were both pissed off. We had young kids on the way. We had kids on the way. Our wives are pregnant. Like, God, this can't be America. So we're like, why don't we just change these account names to, I think I changed mine to impeach Donald Trump, and Ed changed his to something along those lines as well. And we started tweeting.
You guys were not posters before Trump at all. I guess I didn't know that because I knew the history with the Justin Bieber and like that sort of thing, but I had no idea that was like it was just dormant up until like 2016.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we kept those like impeach Donald Trump and whatever Ed's account was, we kept those names for maybe like 6 months, and then we made the worst decision ever. Let's use our real names. So that's what we did.
Okay, so Brian, you're talking to Whack Nicholson here, and I can't tell you how nice it is to use a fake name. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to wake up every day and not actually be Whack Nicholson when the sunshine hits my face.
Yes, so what in Twitter's mind, they see this Justin Bieber and Jonas Brother account from 2010 that suddenly becomes impeach Donald Trump and then becomes Brian Krassenstein. So in their mind, they're thinking, this can't be a legitimate account. He must have bought it. So Twitter tells us that, tells our attorneys that, and we're like, we have the emails from 2009 when we registered the accounts in my Gmail. I'll just send them that. So we send them that. Ed had the email too, the registration email. We send them that. They're like, yeah, you're right, but we're still not going to unban you. We will, however, put out a statement to the press. Let us know what you want us to say. So I tell them, our attorney tells them, we just want you to say that we were incorrect when we said that the Krassensteins bought engagement or bought their accounts. It was on us. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. Sue us. So then our attorneys tell us, yeah, I mean, you can sue them, but they're going to tell you that you're limited purpose public figures. So you're going to have to prove malice, which, I mean, we couldn't really do that. I mean, it was kind of, they did think it. And it's probably going to cost you $200,000 or $300,000 because they're going to take it to the federal level. So
Brian, that's horrible. That fucking sucks, bro. That sucks.
Yeah,
that's horrible. I just want to say, because I feel like we, like yourself and the rest of us here, are like, we are of a certain age that we know if you say you bought #1 Justin Bieber fan in 2011 on Twitter, like not bought, I mean like signed up for it though. If you like just had like #1 Justin Bieber on Twitter, that's a very valuable ad, and that's a real business. And it's really crazy that you guys could have that level of foresight and then also be so like shackled by your own success. That's so strange.
But do you know what's really crazy is the fact that Justin Bieber fans were actually interested in politics. Like, I was shocked by that.
Well,
I'm not shocked by that at all. I'm not shocked by that at all.
When they followed the account originally, they were probably like teens, and then 6 years later, they're growing up. They might still use that account, and they're like, oh. I mean, it's not a secret. The youth hate Republicans.
Wait a minute,
and hate
Donald Trump does suck. Yeah.
Yeah. And now they're like maybe 18, 19,
There's that
18,
famous,
maybe even 20. Yeah. So of course
there's
they
that
would probably
famous
be interested.
tweet. The famous tweet that's like, I joined twitter.com in 2012 to watch One Direction's progress on the X Factor, and now I'm a communist. And it's like, that's a very real thing that has happened to a lot of people.
Definitely.
So, Brian, you sort of speak and present yourself as somebody who's like not this sort of deeply ironic, online spirited kind of guy, but you're clearly very online. How do you sort of separate your life on Twitter from your everyday life?
Oh man, I mean, it's like, I live in Florida. I live in Lee County, which is like, I think it went like 69% Republican. So like the vast majority of the people I interact with, as well as my friends, are Trump supporters. You go out in a boat and like every boat has a Trump flag or a Trump won flag now, I guess.
It's the beautiful boats. It's the boats that Trump loves.
Yeah,
the boat
exactly.
people.
So I mean, it's like night and day, right? And I think that actually helps me a little bit because I feel like that makes me be able to like listen to those people on Twitter who are pro-Trump, because I just see them as my pro-Trump friends here in Florida, right?
Kind of humanizes them a little bit.
Exactly.
There was something I wanted to ask you. We jumped forward a little bit. When you got suspended, there was that whole, first of all, Jacob Wohl took credit for you guys getting suspended, which seemed to be very untrue. But then it sounded like he like reached out to you guys with some sort of business
Caleb,
proposal.
are you calling my close personal friend Jacob Wall a liar?
I would never do that. But what I'm asking for Brian to correct the record, because it sounds like he reached out to you guys to form some sort of band Twitter guy alliance of some sort. What was that, and how come nothing ever materialized from that?
Yeah, so Wall claimed that he got us banned, and I don't believe that for a second. I mean, he just wanted the attention, the publicity, and the credit, I think. And I think like the first day we were banned, he texted me, and I had his number because we were actually investigating him over that whole Carolyn Cass, Robert Mueller thing. And
hell yeah, dude.
and
Caroline Cass, there's a name we haven't heard in years.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. I mean, we got kind of close with her, and like kind of
Jesus,
like,
really?
It was kind of a sad story. But Wall wanted us to work with him, and I don't know, like one of his stupid ideas, like go against Twitter or whatever.
Brian, are you claiming that my close personal friend Jacob Wall has ever had a stupid idea?
I'm sorry, Whack.
I'd read somewhere that you guys had some sort of phone. It was, I don't know if it was the two of you and Jacob or one of you and Jacob, but there was some sort of 30-minute phone call that I read somewhere in my research for this. What was his pitch? Like, what did he like materially? What did he want?
He just wanted us to team up and take on censorship. So it would be somebody on the left and somebody on the right. It wasn't 30 minutes. I think it was like maybe 10 seconds, and I hung up.
He wanted you to go to some like guerrilla press release outside of CPAC or whatever, like all one of those shenanigans that he did.
He also wanted to give you a
insane.
He also wanted to give you a totally heterosexual hickey, Brian. He wanted to totally give you a totally normal heterosexual hickey for the press conference, I'm sure.
I think that's probably accurate.
Yeah, Jacob Wall. I haven't thought of that name, Jacob Wall, in so long. I forget, was he banned on Twitter as well? Like he never came back
shortly before, didn't he?
And he's not been reinstated. I assume I would have known. I'm assuming.
Didn't he get in a lot of trouble for like securities fraud or something? Isn't he like actually under indictment?
He's in a lot of like legitimately serious trouble. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh no, he was sentenced. He was sentenced for running robocalls in Ohio during the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, I forgot about that. Good thing you didn't get involved with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was a whole surefire intelligence thing, and what happened was his father was well, I don't want to say this because I don't want to be sued for defamation, but I'm 99.9% sure that it was his father called and threatened us.
As a parody. Yeah, you're saying that as a parody. It's a joke.
Non-actionable.
Right.
What did he threaten you for?
We actually broke the story that Jacob Wall was behind Carolyn Cass's claims that Robert Mueller sexually assaulted her, and that she was making it up. And we had, I'd say, maybe 4 hours of phone calls with Carolyn Cass, and we talked her out of her. We're like, what are you doing? What are you doing to yourself? I mean, you know who Jacob Wall is. Like, why are you doing this? What's the point? And it's like she was just a troubled young lady, and like he saw it and took advantage of it. It was really sad, actually. Like she's a really good person.
Yeah, I mean that sounds horrible, dude. And I haven't read your like specific stuff about it, but I just remember it being like this. I mean, it just never felt like a good situation. And I kind of want to pivot away from sadder stuff into asking you, because I asked you about your sort of online presence and being like a highly online guy. Do you have people that you like highly respect, highly dislike? I mean, even if it's like, I'm not trying to get you to like put yourself in a bad situation. I'm more asking like, what do you see as like the online sphere of like a podcast like ours, podcasts that are more popular, someone like Joe Rogan versus like Chapo Trap House? Like, what do you think about those sort of entities on the internet?
Oh man, Chapo did a great episode with us probably like 5 years ago. If you haven't listened to that,
Brian, I've listened to it many times, but I'm curious, like, what do you think of them now? What do you think about like that oeuvre of like what we're doing to a certain extent, of like a leftist personality based, like highly internet poisoned podcast? Like, what do you think about that?
I'm all for them, and
Really?
that goes for the left and the right. I'm all for the freedom of speech. I think that everybody should have a right to do what you guys are doing, both sides. And I'm sure some of it gets into some hateful content. I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking a lot about the right. But I think that if it's out there, I think we're all smart. Well, hopefully many of us are smart enough to be able to see through some of it and see it for what it is. So yeah, I mean, I like Rogan. I don't think he's doing anything dangerous to society. I think that it's fine.
So you're pretty neutral on even some of the more like controversial. Like I would say, I mean, personally, I would say Rogan is like probably more right leaning. You're pretty neutral. It sounds like with Elon Musk, with Rogan, with a lot of these people. It's from what it sounds like, at least from my perspective, like neutral or to even like you like some of these people.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I like them, but I don't mind listening to them and just hearing where they're coming from. I mean, we went on Tim Pool's podcast a couple months ago, and
oh damn,
it was like, I mean, like he said, you're the only people on the left that ever came on, and I think the Surfs went on last week, and they did actually a good job, I think. But I don't mind talking to the other side, and if we can create a dialogue, even if you think that dialogue is idiocracy, I still think that it's important to have, and maybe through that dialogue you can kind of bring people more towards the center.
See, my concern has always been, especially in the Trump era and it going further, I guess, back into the Trump era, which if we're kind of heading to right now, is a lot of people, at least from my perspective, on the right aren't necessarily just stupid, but they're intentionally misleading. Like they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you kind of go in talking to these people with that perspective? Like maybe they're just kind of like trying to take me and people in your audience or whoever's audience for a ride for their own end? Like, do you kind of acknowledge that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'd say that that's pretty accurate for some people, right?
Like Tim Pool, I think Tim Pool, that's definitely a lot of his shtick.
That's what I was going to say. Specifically, he knows what he's doing. So you think that this isn't a criticism. I was just asking you to maybe clarify. You think that the dialogue or the discourse with these people is valuable, but is it really if you've got a guy like Tim Pool who's intentionally being misleading, who is essentially trying to grift off of the concept of having somebody from the other side come on and mislead them? And if the discourse is at best useless and probably very arguably negative. So what would you say to that critique?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair for you to say that. I don't know if I agree 100%. I think that, do you think an episode of Tim Pool speaking with some far right, like Milo or something, is better than him speaking with me, or worse for, I think, society? I think his crowd, his viewers are already pretty far to the right. So I don't think it probably makes much of a dent either way.
I would actually really lean towards what you're saying there, Brian, because I think that I struggle to say you and Ed, because I know that, like, well, first of all, I know you guys were lying when it was your wives running those accounts. It was really you or whatever. But no comment. That's fine. But it's like, even if it's a lie, it's like you're bringing your family into it in that way, and I'm sure even if you were lying, that, you talked to your wife about it, certainly, and Ed talked to his wife, and you all talked together. And so
it was actually just my wife. And it's funny because she actually is who got me into politics. So it was her account. I would tell her to post stuff. I would go into it and post stuff sometimes. But it actually was her account. And she was she was way more political than I was until 2016.
Well, that's what's really interesting to me, and what I was going to ask is because we are a podcast. The four of us have become sort of a show that is growing very quickly, and we are realizing our lane very intensely in a sort of immediate way, and it seems like you and Ed did that as well. And I'm kind of wondering, did you want what you guys have now? Did you want to be these sort of like, I mean, I hope you don't take this the wrong way,
No,
but
no,
like
go for it. Ask me anything.
The center left sort of clowns, like if you're on Tim Pool, if you're on, I mean, this is a self-conscious thing we talked about. We don't want to make you guys these clowns. I want to talk to you about like what you guys actually think, but it's so easy if you're on Love It or Leave It, or if you're on Tim Pool's show, or if you're on some Twitter space or something, that people can clown on you and you guys can take it really well. But like, how do you feel about that? How do you process that?
I mean, like, I get so much crap on Twitter that it's like nothing now. Like it doesn't bother me. I feel like,
yeah, but you also don't drink alcohol or do drugs, so I'm like just wondering how you take this.
Yeah, how do you? What's your mental health routine? That's what we're gonna ask you about, the workout stuff later. But let's talk about mentals. How are you coping with all that?
Oh, I like, it's easy for me to turn off. You know, like I'm so used to getting so much hate from people. Like, I feel like right now is so much better than it was in like 2018, like in the midst of the Trump presidency. But something that we did talk about, Ed and I, when we came back, got our accounts back, I think it was the beginning of November, the end of October. We didn't want to go about things the same way as we did during those Trump years, because we felt that the outrage posting, it didn't really accomplish anything, right? It just made people on the right hate us even more. And on the left, yeah, got a bunch of retweets, but it didn't really do much, you know? I mean, yeah, maybe we got some followers, but
you kind of realize that posting might not always be praxis, maybe.
Right. So like what we decided is, like, when we come back, let's still post our left-leaning opinions, but also like include a dialogue and put it out there, like why is the right thinking what they're thinking, and then have them all come together and discuss the issue. And yeah, you're going to have those on the far right and those on the far left that are attacking each other. But I think that when you do that, it kind of allows the left to see how the right rationalizes things. And this is the center right and center left, and the right to see how the left rationalizes things. And it actually, like, I've been finding that it brings people together, and you're never going to take that 15% on each far side, but I feel like the 70% that are somewhere in the middle, I feel like they can at least understand each other more. But yeah, so that's kind of our strategy since November.
So you're kind of like political triage at this point. You know, we can't actually change hearts and minds, but maybe we can stave off horrible events by humanizing one another.
Well, that's exactly what I was actually going to ask you about, Brian, is like you define yourself as center left, and you think of yourself as someone to the left of like a person like Elon Musk or Tim Pool or Joe Rogan. But what makes you further to the left than someone like that?
I mean, I'm big on like the social issues. Like I feel like why is the right so keen on trying to, like, why do they care so much about what people are doing in their personal lives? Like
trans issues.
Yeah, exactly. Like trans issues, like gay, lesbian. I mean, everything that's anything, like these culture wars, all this culture war shit. So like, I'm so far away from that. Economics, like I'm still to the left, but like I I can understand some things of conservatives, although I think conservatives are not very conservative until it's a liberal in office. So
Yeah,
don't
so
get
you're
that.
talking about like military spending and things like
Yeah,
tax
just
cuts and
spending
that
and
kind of
like,
stuff.
the
Yeah.
national debt and all that.
So as far as like specific policies that the left tend to get really hung up on, I mean, for a lot of leftists, it's about healthcare, childcare, housing, and food. How do you feel about like government programs that might provide things like healthcare, housing, childcare, and food?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. I mean, especially healthcare. There needs to be a safety net, and as much as the right wants to pretend that people don't need it, there's so many people that do. But at the same time, I think that the one thing that the right is right about is that people do abuse welfare sometimes, and I think we could have better ways of managing that. But
Yeah, but
we
I'm sure
definitely need a
that
safety net.
I'm sure you're also aware that like even like the worst welfare abuser, even the worst 150 worst welfare abusers would spend a lot less than the worst military spending
Oh
abuser,
yeah,
you know? Like,
100%.
yeah. And
And a lot of
I
the times they'll just use that as a wedge to shut down the conversation, or even like as an idea as well. Like they'll be like, oh, they'll abuse it, so we can't do it at all. Is kind of like the strategy, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you raise corporate taxes to where they were a decade ago, and I mean, it makes up for all the welfare that we're using.
Oh, I just want to ask because I think that it's really important to sort of highlight, because what you and your brother do is a very different thing than a project I think a lot of politically minded people have in mind, where you guys have generally far left leaning ideas, but you practice like an active sort of pragmatism. Like you don't want to rock the boat too much. And so I'm wondering, like, what do you think would happen if somebody tried to go too far with a certain like leftist policy?
Like how would I react?
No, I mean, not even you personally, but like, what do you think is like, what is too far and what makes it too far? If like I say that everybody should get free education, housing, healthcare, childcare, food, like, what of that is too far and how could it be perceived as too far to you, not to the general public, but to you personally?
Yeah, so like for instance, the whole college education, paying off student debt. Like I'm kind of on the fence with that. Like I can see why some people would maybe be a little bit upset that, hey, I paid my student debt off last year or 3 years ago. I worked hard, I worked my butt off, and now all these
Yeah.
kids are getting
Yeah.
theirs paid. So like that's the one example, I guess.
So like a candidate maybe kind of like Bernie Sanders was maybe too, like for you, a little too idealistic or something.
I really like Bernie Sanders, and I think that he has a ton of great ideas. But like, yeah, some things I think are just a little bit too far. I think we need. I mean, like I feel Joe Biden is very centered, despite what the right says. I think he's probably more in the center than most people.
Yeah, I would
give him
agree with
credit
that.
for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, but I support, like I think my politics are along those lines.
Can I ask you, who did you have in the 2020 primary? Who were you supporting?
In the primary, I like Biden because
You're Biden all the way.
It was mostly because I thought he had the best chance. I
Just beating Trump
that
was your thing.
Yeah, just beating Trump. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess after the fact, after the primary, it seemed like that's what most people in the Democratic primary really voted for. Because, like, I mean, we were all in the trenches online at the time. Us, like me, Caleb, and Whack, we were all posting. But we kind of were like, oh, of course, Bernie. I mean, I think we're all Bernie supporters. We're like, his policies are clearly the best in all of our opinions. Speaking for all of us, but
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day,
no, I was all on AB Klobuchar. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see how
really
your
liked
hair
her
would
comb.
fare in a blizzard.
But no, yeah. So basically, I think what we learned, what the online left kind of learned, is like, oh, people just in the 2020 election in particular, just kind of wanted to beat Trump.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was, I think, kind of sobering for some of us. But I mean, I don't know. I guess Biden won.
Yeah.
for now.
I think if it was just the election among Democrats, I probably would have leaned towards Bernie. And
really,
even though I think he's too far left, I think that a lot of his policies would really have helped America. And I mean, if he was in there for 4 or 8 years, I think he would have done a lot, and it probably would have shifted back a little bit to the right and maybe away from that far left. So I would have supported Bernie, but I just didn't think he had the chance against Trump.
Mm-hmm. We've got 10-ish minutes here before we finish this up. If it's okay, can we go back and talk about some Twitter stuff? Because that is really the meat and potatoes of our show.
Sure.
Okay, here's a fun question. Do you miss Trump being on Twitter? Do you think he was funny? Do you miss the engagement? Do you miss I mean, obviously, when it comes down to it, he's a piece of shit. We all fucking hate his guts. But there was something to be said about the spectacle of a Donald Trump tweet. Do you miss that at all, or am I crazy?
You know, like I can't imagine what it would be like with Trump and Elon on Twitter. Like how would that play out? Is Elon going to be?
Oh, they would get into
Trump?
so many good fights. They would get
because I mean, you kind of that brings up a good, I guess, observation. Is Elon is kind of like the modern Twitter Trump in a way. Like he fills the same role that Trump did for a while.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, though, that Trump had that post on Truth Social. I had Elon in my office. I could have had him on his knees begging like a dog. I
Incredible
just
post.
kind of feel like, politics aside, if they were both on there, I don't think Trump would allow Elon to ascend and be the number one draw, even if they were in complete agreement. I think that they would have to fight.
Elon voted for Biden. But like, I think something that people don't really realize, well, maybe they do, but I mean, look at Tesla. So Elon did not spend a dime on advertising to this day on Tesla. And he's doing the same with Twitter. He wants to create engagement and traffic. And what's the best way to do that? Tweet things like George Soros is like Magneto or whatever he said. Just create controversy. And that's what drives traffic. And as sad as that is, that's what people want. And
just to say, is all engagement really good engagement? Especially when you're in the last few weeks, he's really knocking on the door, if not stepping foot on anti-Semitic shit. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. That Magneto thing was, holy shit, this is like bad. And then he had the within 12 hours, he doubled down on it basically. And then the JDL, he's like, or what was it?
It was the Anti-Defamation League. He said that he said they were just the Defamation League.
Exactly.
And I have my beefs with the Anti-Defamation League.
Same, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to ask yourself, why is he saying this now?
It's like I was shocked. I was shocked with this Soros stuff, but I guess I wasn't shocked at the same time. And yeah, I think it's like, from an outsider looking in, it's a horrible business move, I would say. But at the same time, it's bringing all this traffic to Twitter. I don't know what his long-term plan is. It's certainly boosting traffic in the short term, but is it losing advertisers and losing users over the long run? I think that could be the case as well. So I don't know. Maybe he's genius and he knows something, or maybe he's just tweeting his opinion and doesn't give a crap.
But Brian, my thing is, like, you were in a position to actually say to him, like, you were in a dialogue with him, and you actually had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what you just said is really fucking anti-Semitic and plays on some really fucked up tropes. And instead you were just like, well, actually, Magneto, like, I think that you played a useful idiot in that moment. So
I did reply a couple times, and I said a little bit more. So I replied to that reply where he said he hated humanity. And then again, this morning I replied to, or not this morning, sometime today, I replied and I kind of explained how I see it. And
yeah, but the thing is, dude, is that, like, you are, even though you are very good at compartmentalizing your personal life, which I commend you for, it's, you know, that being online like that, if you make multiple replies, what you're doing is fishing to see which reply is going to get the most attention, and if the one that is the most anti-Semitic gets the most attention, don't you feel kind of responsible for that?
So yeah, no. So I replied to different tweets of his, like a reply to a reply. But so my personal view, and I'm Jewish, I I don't see the tweet itself as anti-Semitic. I see it as definitely something that people who are anti-Semitic are going to run with and use as a tool to spread anti-Semitism. So I don't want to say Elon's anti-Semitic.
The George Soros is a villain thing has been a far right wing.
It is, and you're absolutely
way
right.
to pry open the door for anti-Semitism for years. So like, I get that. Like, you may not see him, like you and he may not see himself as anti-Semitic, but if you are repeating everything an anti-Semite says, then you are de facto an anti-Semite. And like, I'm no big fan of George Soros either. I don't give a fuck about the guy. What I care about is the fact that the richest person in the world who runs the platform that is the place where culture is created, especially for the media, is saying things like this. And like, you actually have the opportunity for a dialogue with him, and you aren't, like, you missed a really important opportunity, I think, to say right away as the first response, this thing you're saying is anti-Semitic. It is a well-established anti-Semitic trope. And instead you were just like, well, Magneto in the Marvel comics. Like, it was really like frustrating as a person who has 1/1,000,000th of your reach to see that happen.
Well, so I replied again to his reply when he said he hated humanity, and I told him why George Soros is unfairly criticized. I also replied today, and I explained that even though he might not be an anti-Semite, what he said was basically opening the door for actual anti-Semites to use that to spread their anti-Semitism.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brian. I really have a bad habit of doing that. But can I read you some of the quote tweets that I found from that post?
Oh yeah, I read them. Yeah,
I mean, like, there's actual neo-Nazis being like, holy crap, this is so epic and based, and we're gonna have Elon Musk talking about how Auschwitz had wooden doors in the gas chamber, so it's fake within the week. And it's like, okay, so I guess you don't think he's an anti-Semite, but I think that Elon Musk, much like Tim Pool, is a man who knows what he's doing. Do you agree, or do you think that why do you think he said that, especially at that time, and why do you think that he followed up and doubled down on it, tripled down? He's actually tripled down on it by this point, probably quadrupled down on it. Why do you think that is?
it's a good question. So, I mean, you might be right. It also could be the fact that Soros sold Tesla, and he's been pushing against Elon's takeover of Twitter, and Elon's just holding a grudge. So I don't know. I don't want to say what's happening in his head. I do think it's irresponsible. I think it's a horrible decision. And you're absolutely right that it's opening the door to these anti-Semites to kind of use it as fuel to push their agenda. So I disagree with it. I would absolutely say, why is he doing this?
So he actually subscribes to you guys. Elon does on Twitter through his new subscription service. And you guys have been in spaces at the same time. And probably I don't see that relationship changing unless you were offended more than you're letting on. Do you think that there's a chance that you're going to broach this issue with him in the future? Or is this something you're interested in having more of a dialogue with him as somebody who has more access to him than most?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have that dialogue on a tweet thread because most of the time he doesn't reply or probably doesn't see it. But like, if there was the opportunity, I'd love to. I mean, if I could sit down with him and tell him how I feel, I'd absolutely take that chance.
Can I ask, is that why you're being a little bit more neutral maybe on Elon Musk? Because you want to make sure, like, maybe someday, like, because we've seen how Elon acts when people don't even necessarily cross him, but just don't do exactly what he wants, like with Matt Taibbi or Barry Weiss. Like, he just drops them completely and moves on. Are you kind of like worried that if you
it's interesting because he followed me and subscribed to me like within an hour after I criticized him. So like okay. I don't know if criticizing him is really gonna change things. Like I mean change things for my to my demise. I don't think he minds it if I criticize him. I think he sees it as just a way to get engagement flowing on Twitter.
Okay. And yeah, no, so I guess my question from that, like the whole, like, not necessarily dropping you, but like like maybe you'll eventually or be able to at some point just have access to be able to like maybe take him away. Because I think most people kind of see this like red pill, like, you know, this traditional like right-wing rabbit hole he's going down. Do you think that like maybe being a bit more neutral with him is going to like allow you to maybe try to pull him out in any way you can? Is that where you're kind of being?
Because let's be honest, you are being
kind of neutral about
yesterday
Elon.
I had a well-known journalist, I'm not going to say who it was, but they texted me and they said, "Good job trying to de-radicalize Elon." So like I thought that was funny, but like I'm just trying to create a dialogue, and if what I can say it can maybe even move the needle a little bit in his mind. I think the better approach to just saying, "Hey, you're an anti-Semite, man. Shut the hell up," is to actually have a dialogue and do it in a respectful manner.
I have a kind of weird question, because just everything you've said, you have this sort of bone deep kind of pragmatism to you that you're talking about, that like in order to get along, you have to make certain compromises and have certain hold certain positions you might not believe in. It's like, how do you know at the end of the day what you believe? How do you know what you think is right is right?
You mean in that respect that I think that kind of having that discussion is actually going to lead to a positive outcome?
I mean, regardless of the discussion and regardless of the outcome, how do you know what you yourself believe?
What's your moral barometer there?
I mean, I just try to educate myself, and I read a lot. That topic interests me. I read a lot. I try to get as much information on things as possible and try to understand both sides. I mean, that's pretty much.
So can I ask, in the context of Wack's last question, like point blank, because we've kind of danced around this, like, you know, what you're doing is kind of this discourse thing, and maybe it's not changing too many minds, but it's like, it's building bridges maybe somehow. What, in the context of, I guess, your guys' small media empire that you guys got now, what do you see as the actual purpose? Like what do you want from what you're doing? What would be your ultimate goal? What role do you see yourselves playing?
Yeah, so first of all, like I wouldn't consider even a ant-sized media empire. Like I think like I have like 160 Twitter subscribers paying $4 a month. So I mean, maybe $600 a month I'm making, and sure that could grow. But I like ultimately the reason I started was that my son was in my wife's stomach, in her uterus, as Trump was winning the election. And it scared me to death that the country was headed in that direction. Like we didn't, like, despite everything everybody says about us being grifters and about us trying to make money, like that's not why I decided to do any of this. And I can speak for Ed as well. Yeah, I mean, if I make money doing it, I'm not going to turn that down. But like, I don't, the money I'm making isn't changing my life at all. I'm not
I want to say for myself, I never once thought you guys were in it for the money.
Sure.
Like,
Good
it never
clarification.
felt that way.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like that's Vice News did a piece. They came to our house and they basically asked that, and I said no, that's not what we're doing. And he's like, why are you taking such offense to that? I'm like, because everybody says that. Everybody thinks we're in it for the money.
Of course.
They say you're paid by the DNC. They say that you're paid by Trump. Everybody
Right.
thinks you're taking money from someone else.
George Soros.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't want to take too much of your time, Brian, but I do want to. This is deep into the Patreon. Remember, we're behind the paywall, and I just want to know. You and your brother are grouped in with some people that a lot of people really don't like. Jeff Tiedrick, Brooklyn Dead Defiant,
Friends of the
those
show.
kind of people.
We're getting them on too, one by one.
I've never spoken to either of them. Like,
So I'm wondering, like, do you have any like strong opinions about any of the people that you get lumped in with so regularly?
So like Tiedrich and Brooklyn Dad. Like,
or anybody else.
I don't really.
There's a bunch.
I kind of like their style's a little bit overkill, I'd say.
Oh wow, okay.
But but maybe that was our style back in 2018 too. So I don't know.
Yeah, you guys were pretty bombastic. I feel like is a fair way to put it back in the Trump days.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I've never spoken to either that I remember. I mean, maybe a DM or something to Brooklyn Dad or Jeff. So I've spoken to JoJo from Jersey. I get along with her.
Who's the one? What's the name of the girl who dances?
Angela Belcamino.
Yes, that's the one.
Oh yeah, I know of her. Like, she replies to my tweets. I know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, do you have like opinions on one of them versus
Like,
the others, or
I guess who's your crew? Like, other than your brother, like, do you have a crew that you like run with? Like, I don't know.
With
That
our
makes
Twitter's
sense.
tweeting
PvP.
crew.
Yeah.
There really isn't anybody and something that Ed and I always try to do is like just do our own thing. Like, people have reached out and said, "Hey, you want to join up and we can retweet our stuff, or we can do business stuff together?" And like, we always turn them down. It's just not like, we trust each other, and it's hard to trust other people.
it sounds like you guys
you guys have the hearts of true posters. Is what
yeah,
it sounds like.
that's exactly what I was going to say, is that you guys are
Yeah.
really old school posters. You guys are Jonas Brothers fanboys. You are Justin Bieber fanboys. And
Yeah,
this
I mean, what else
that
would you
goes bone
expect?
deep. All right. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great conversation. I'm really glad that we could do this with you, man.
No, it's been great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you so much.
Anything you want to plug or anything you want to talk about?
Not really. I mean, we have a Twitter. I have a Twitter subscription for $4 a month. So does Ed.
What are you going to find behind the paywall?
Yeah. So like, I post a few times a day. I do videos. Ed did a Zoom call today, but we do a lot of private Twitter spaces too, just about various topics. But yeah, we're kind of just trying to figure it out and see where Twitter kind of takes things.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you buy my book, I don't get any money from it because it's discontinued, but it's still on Amazon. But go buy it. It's kind of fun.
I'll have to put it on my mantle.
It's out of print, so if you buy it, that's a
Ooh,
collectible.
that's
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. There's only
shit.
1,500 in existence, I think. Maybe 2,000.
Goddamn. Okay, that
I'm
I
going to
did not
snag
know about
one,
the
and
book.
Brian, I'm gonna work it out to get some autographs on it.
Only 6 signed copies.
Wow.
Oh, shit.
My God! Oh God! We gotta take a pilgrimage to Florida and bring our own copies of how the people trumped
Yeah, I'm sure
Ronald Plum.
Brian and Ed would love that if we just showed up.
That'd be cool, yeah. Not my house, maybe a bar or something.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, thanks again, Brian. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.